Stories that won't go away, that refuse to die.
3 TV pilots that leaned in hard on the 1970s fascination with the supernatural and explaining real-world mysteries, like how my cat managed to take out a reverse mortgage on my house.
All of which, of course, is impossible.
Which is not impossible.
A search for pieces of a mysterious medallion, a race car driver who has visions, and a demonic takeover.
Suppose I prove to you the supernatural exists.
Search for the gods, Baffled, and Spectre.
This is it.
There are evil forces there, and we can't be too careful.
The 70s saw a wave of mysterious and spooky thrillers in television and in movies. Not just in the area of pure horror, but there was a fascination with unexplained real-world mysteries. Were the ancients visited by aliens? Is ESP a thing? Can you actually book a return ticket to the Bermuda Triangle?
You mean like UFOs?
Perhaps UFOs.
Today we're looking at 3 pilot movies from the 70s that, subject matter aside, are pretty much unrelated. Or are they? No, they aren't. Or are they?
Find the rest. Find that mystery. Find yourself, Willie.
2 of these are filmed in the UK, 2 have links to Star Trek, all have familiar stars. One of them is pretty good, and the other 2 are okay. So we'll look at them not chronologically, but in order of bonkersness. Also, we'll be looking at them out of order just to mess with some people.
But I'm not scared of black cats, Friday the 13th, or walking under ladders.
You most likely know a pilot is a trial episode made to show network executives how a proposed series may look. Pilots can be episodes of shows already on the air where suddenly a regular character will take a backseat to some random new lead, or it can be made as a feature-length episode, and if the series isn't ordered, it becomes a movie. And then of course it has some dialogue at the end talking about all the amazing adventures they'll have in the future.
Mr. Seven and Miss Lincoln have some interesting experiences in store for them.
Yes, I think we could say that.
You're going to have no shortage of people coming to get your services.
But if I ever needed a partner, I can't think of anyone I'd rather have.
Search for the Gods was a 1975 pilot for a hoped-for continuing series that was never ordered. So this pilot was instead screened as a one-off television movie of the week.
Just bring me the medallion.
Search for the Gods starts with some scene setting. Some mysterious guy in the shadows is discussing something with his sidekick, Mr. Stryker. Shadow Dude, for want of a better name, is scheming to acquire all of the pieces of a mysterious medallion. Because if he held all of the pieces of the medallion, he would something something mystery mystery that nobody else could ever something something mystery mystery because of the power contained by the something something mystery mystery that will something something mystery mystery. Or maybe he just wants a really nice gift for his wife's birthday. Meanwhile in New Mexico, Vietnam vet Willie Longfellow is on a personal quest to find himself. He doesn't quite know what he's looking for, but he's not interested in returning to his privileged life back in Boston. He's heading for Taos in New Mexico, where he stops to help an elderly Native American man, Lucio, who's being hassled by some thugs. Willie's reward? Being thrown in the clink with Lucio.
Buttons. Peyote.
There he also meets local troublemaker Shan, but during the night, Lucio chats with Willie about some enigmatic matters, asks Willie to pass some items on to his granddaughter should he pass away, and then he passes away.
Why don't you tell us who you were?
You know what I mean. Your father's a federal judge.
Willie tries to comply with Lucio's wishes, but again rumbles with some thugs, and pretty soon it's clear that the partial medallion is being sought by a number of people, all linked back to Shadow Dude and Mr. Stryker. A local art dealer first offers Willie a couple of $100 and then keeps upping his offer.
Then what? $100,000. Not even if it's a $5,000 hunch?
It's clear he's read the now discredited Stam Fine Guide to Haggling.
We shouldn't have, but we did.
Wherever Willie goes, Shan seems to be not too far away, popping up everywhere, whether you want him to be there or not. Go fill up your gas tank, there's Shan. Stop to take a leak, there's Shan right next to you. Breaking and entering, there's Shan. When Willie finally finds the home of Lucio's granddaughter, Gennaro Montez, she's not home, but guess who's already there making himself at home? I'll give you 2 guesses.
Santa? Don't you trust me?
I trust myself more.
Willie is finally able to hand over the medallion piece to Gennaro, but she's not sure what she's meant to do with it. Meanwhile, Stryker has offered her $20,000 for the medallion, an offer that comes with a veiled threat.
Nothing ever lasts for long with Shan, especially friendships.
While she's thinking it over, the trio heads for the Taos Pueblo for Lucio's funeral, and so Gennaro can get some guidance from the elders. Willie is offered the chance to partake in a trial to try and find some answers where, under the influence, he has a vision that gives him even more questions. Like, what does this mean, and what does that mean, and where's the nearest 7-Eleven? They consult Dr. Henderson on the medallion, and here we get some context. The writing on the medallion is Sumerian, and it's very old.
50 to 55,000 years.
The imagery on the medallion is similar to markings in Peru that point to the Nazca Plains, or it could just be a remarkable coincidence. Coincidence is a funny old thing, like, say, when a concussion patient suddenly starts talking about V being a documentary.
So it could be written off as coincidence.
During Willie's trip, the elder had drawn an image that seems awfully like a map. They may be dealing with Native American mysticism here, but apart from that, the medallion's point of origin is unclear. One way or the other, it's a long way away.
And giving us
What?
answers to questions we're afraid to ask.
Shan, Gennaro and Willie embark on an expedition to follow the clues where they'll hopefully find more clues. Shan and Willie have a punch-up. Willie and Gennaro top off an evening of passion with a dip in a natural hot tub, and Shan gets to do some good old-fashioned double dealing before he rappels down a cliff with some dynamite so they can blast open a tomb where they find a second piece of the medallion. Shan pulls a gun but he's shot by Stryker and his goon, and after a struggle it looks as though both medallion pieces are lost in the river, but apparently not.
Doesn't that make you curious to look further?
So, the postscript is Henderson suggesting that perhaps Willie's purpose could now be to discover the rest of the medallions in order to solve one big mystery. You know, the mystery of who or what made the medallion and what it's for. Gennaro stays behind, Willie embarks on his new quest, while Shan turns up just as the credits begin. Now, we don't know if Shan was apologising, or offering to accompany Willie, or was trying to sell him 2 weeks in a Pueblo timeshare.
Yeah, you know about that stuff?
We'll just never know, since any follow-up series did not eventuate. Did Shan talk about all the amazing adventures they'd have in the future?
And that's the last that was ever seen of him.
Search for the Gods was a pilot for a series that, like the ill-fated Cannonball Run with mopeds, didn't get very far. The TV movie was written by veteran writer Ken Peters, but the created by credit was given to Herman Miller, who was not a chair. I checked twice. He was a screenwriter who'd also create the cop series McCloud and develop the David Carradine series Kung Fu.
The bloody idiot had it in his hand and he let it get away.
Postmortems bore me, Stryker.
Judd Taylor directed what seems like one episode of practically every series going, including a few installments of the final season of Star Trek. His direction is solid. It's very matter-of-fact, apart from Willie's vision quest, which gets a little freaky, but not full-on freaky, just a little freaky. It's not going to have anyone run screaming from the living room in terror, but it's freaky enough.
I don't have any idea what it is.
The New Mexico locations add a lot of production value, bolstering the film's relatively naturalistic tone. It often feels more like a low-budget movie than an extended television episode.
I can't spend my life looking for something I'm not sure even exists.
Stephen McHattie had a very long career as a character actor, but going back to watch this after knowing him from all those character actor roles makes it a little hard to think of him as a lead. First billed Kurt Russell had already been a child star and then a juvenile star making goofy comedies for the likes of Disney before landing the role of the untrustworthy Shan. In hindsight, it does seem as though the leads may have worked better if they had swapped roles. But, you know, Kurt Russell has an ability to not suck in practically anything he was in.
30,000? 30 million? You can't put a price tag on this.
No, you're being stupid, Willie. You see, you're being stupid.
Victoria Racimo did guest shots in dozens of programs over a long career before moving to behind-the-scenes work. Actual movie star Ralph Bellamy turned up as Henderson, which made me wait for his brother played by Don Amici to show up.
That's some jump. Call it a hunch.
So, after all of that, it wasn't all that mysterious. The mystery is really more of a treasure hunt in an action-adventure series that might eventually lead to some answers that could possibly shed light onto some major mysteries about the universe, but in the end, bubkus. It's interesting for its tonal differences to a lot of television at the time, but at its heart, you know how a series based on Search for the Gods would have ended up. Willie wanders into a new place looking for clues to the medallion pieces, but gets involved in some local matter. I mean, you just knew how this was going to end up, like The Fugitive or The Incredible Hulk, all the same producers' Kung Fu series.
Tales of gods that came to Earth from the sky in their machines of smoke and fire, then left.
So here's where we have to talk about the grip that the book Chariots of the Gods had held on the writers of this and other science fiction and fantasy media in the 70s. Swiss author Erich von Däniken had published Chariots of the Gods in 1968, which quickly became a smash hit, where, in the book, he postulated that many unexplained mysteries of the ancient world were in fact as a result of alien intervention. The book was a bestseller despite a cottage industry springing up to point out von Däniken's incredibly flawed reasoning. I mean, modern conspiracy theories don't even bother with the half-baked evidence or suppositions of von Däniken and skip straight to the out-and-out bullshit. But at the time, it sounded like a cool concept, which would eventually influence everything from Search for the Gods, Battlestar Galactica, Indiana Jones, Alien, Stargate, and while I'm at it, that creepy milkman who keeps insisting that aliens are the reason the milk he delivers is always curdled. It's not just the milk, Dan. Next up, we rewind a bit.
As a matter of fact, every once in a while, I get my kicks walking under a ladder.
Baffled is a weird transatlantic co-production from Man from U.N.C.L.E. producer Norman Felton's Arena Productions and Lou Grade's UK-based distributor ITC. It mixes a fairly standard mystery plot, a little bit of late-period Alfred Hitchcock, and a bit of cheesy adventure series like The Persuaders. Tom Kovac is a race car driver who begins having flashes of visions. He's contacted by a rare bookseller, Michelle Brent, about his vision, which happens to take place in a house operating as a hotel in Devon. And the pair decide to visit as guests.
What you call insight, I call a knock in the head that I got when I wrecked my car at 160 miles an hour.
There they find an American actress, Andrea Glenn, and her daughter Jennifer, who are visiting Britain, hoping to reconcile with the woman's estranged husband, Duncan Sanford. There's also a young couple on their honeymoon, an Italian man, Varelli, and the hotel's formidable owner, Mrs. Faraday. Andrea and Jennifer head to a local cottage where Duncan is supposedly living, where they meet his cousin, Louise Sanford, who's also, quite coincidentally, a fan of Andrea's. Duncan, of course, is not at home for some reason.
Why didn't you tell me that the screaming lady in your vision is Andrea Glenn?
I never saw her in a flick where she screamed.
Tom had been skeptical about his visions, but after discovering his visions match up identically with his new surroundings, he now seems convinced. ESP, or extrasensory perception, is a damn useful thing. I mean, you know the feeling you get when you know a phone will ring about a half a second before it actually does? Well, with ESP, you can turn your phone off before the scammer even dials your number. When visiting the US, I've had waiters with ESP. They seem to know ahead of time when you're going to stiff them for a tip.
G'day, mate. This is my first time in New York.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Tom and Michelle investigate their fellow guests as people don't seem to be what they purport to be. And then people start acting strangely. Away from the hotel, Jennifer meets with her hitherto missing father, Duncan Sanford, who gives her a pendant that has an unusual effect on the girl. Jennifer seems to suddenly age up a few years into a surly teenager, while Mrs. Faraday seems to have had an instant makeover to appear years younger. Tom's having more visions of Andrea being poisoned, and then of course she is. People try to kidnap Michelle, and then there's a chase when it just turns out that the other guests are just random people on holiday. It's riveting stuff. I was sitting on the edge of my seat, if for no other reason than the middle of the seat was still wet from when the dog peed on it.
You're not responsible for it, I hope.
No.
There are more red herrings than a decoy factory. There are more plot cul-de-sacs than a town planner who's lost interest in traffic flow.
If that's possible.
After 30 minutes of plot threads that go pretty much nowhere, it ends up being about Louise Sanford wanting to kill Andrea so she can take Jennifer in as her ward, where she can use Jennifer's psychic abilities for some reason, and then Tom gets his ass kicked by an old woman, which turns out it was in fact this fella who's also not Jennifer's dad but an actor who everybody thought had died. Well, that was a convoluted twist of lemon. No, twist harder. Harder.
You said you found some objects dealing with witchcraft in that burned out shop, right?
The mystery is solved and Tom and Michelle are about to go their separate ways until Tom has another vision and the pair decide to investigate it together. All that's missing is the comment about all the amazing adventures the pair will have in the future. Spoilers, they won't. So, if this had been a television series, that would have been the setup. Tom and Michelle investigating something using Tom's visions to gather clues.
Right on schedule.
I thought you English always said schedule.
Baffled was shot on location and at Pinewood Studios in the UK. When no television network was interested in the concept as a series, the pilot was released as a movie. The version screened in the UK was slightly longer than that shown in the US. If this had gone to a series, it would have been made in the US and most likely shown by NBC, who screened the movie in 1973.
Of course.
As a mystery, it's pretty poor, it's unengaging for the most part, with twists that would make Chubby Checker call his lawyer.
No, not likely.
Leonard Nimoy seems to be the only actor from Star Trek to not immediately find himself out of work for long spells after that show's cancellation, where he moved to Mission Impossible for 2 seasons before spending much of the 70s working solidly in guest roles, on the stage, and as the narrator of the documentary series In Search Of, which, funnily enough, would look at most of the tosh used by the movies in this video.
The unknown force, it appears, is there.
Would a more positive reception to Baffled have seen him as the lead of a UK-made transatlantic series the same way actors like Gene Barry, Shirley MacLaine and Tony Curtis had done when they all made short-lived shows for Lou Grade's ITC?
You certainly do pull in the celebrities.
I don't know. Leonard Nimoy as the actual first billed star in a drama series wasn't something that we saw enough of, and here he seems to be having a lot of fun as a character who stepped into some weird shit.
I know. I wrote that, and it's been bothering me ever since.
Susan Hampshire was a big star in the British industry. Likewise, Vera Miles had appeared in many Hollywood productions. The supporting cast is also very solid, but a solid cast isn't enough to elevate a fairly dull plot leading to a not especially believable ending. The plot unfolds at a languid pace, like a snail typing a 1,500-word essay, and then when the actual plot comes to a head, it's not one of those reveals that has you nodding politely in agreement, but one of those endings where you throw your cocoa mug at the screen. I'm baffled by Baffled!
That's stupid.
Though I have to admit, I think the idea of Nimoy and Susan Hampshire making a series together following on from this could have been a lot of fun.
Whoever said jolly England?
So then we get to Spectre from 1977. Spectre was another of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry's attempts to launch a new non-Star Trek series in the 70s. And I mention him up front, so you aren't thrown off by the appearance of Roddenberry's wife Majel Barrett in a small role. William Sebastian is a respected criminologist who's fallen down the rabbit hole of researching the occult. His estranged research partner, Dr. Hamilton, or Ham, turns up after a call for help.
By the time it's done, we'll have answers in criminal psychology that'll revolutionize the field.
There's a lot of exposition, done very well, but there's a fair bit. Sebastian has a wound from a previous encounter with the demon Asmodeus, and there's the call to go to England and investigate Sir Geoffrey Sion. His sister Anitra Sion had pleaded with Sebastian to take the case, but then she turns up in person to say it was all a misunderstanding and that they don't need to look into the matter. Sebastian's hospitality has its limits when it comes to demons.
What we saw was a succubus.
Don't be ridiculous.
Ham and Sebastian are flown to England on Sion's private jet, piloted by his younger brother Mitri Sion, and during the turbulent flight, Sebastian reveals more and more details to a skeptical Ham.
The acts expected of me were unspeakably vile. I was revolted and I was frightened. I went back on the agreement, and this was done to me.
In England, they stop at a friend's place, Dr. Qualis, only to find him dead, his house on fire, and some unspeakable creature unleashed. Oh, our British cousins and their quaint traditions. I mean, there's tea and scones, fish and chips, and now arson and abomination.
It's a charming compliment.
They meet with Inspector Lestrade, Inspector Cabell, who warns the pair not to make accusations about Sion without very hard evidence. Sion's mansion is quite the trip. Sir Geoffrey Sion envies himself as a posher version of Hugh Hefner, with his stately home looking more like the Playboy Mansion, while his sister, the real Anitra, is disturbed by her brother's decadent lifestyle.
Am I one of the devil's boys?
Oh, much, much worse, sir.
Spookiness abounds when somebody tries to kill Sebastian with a drink, and he toasts his host with an incantation. Look, well, you'll just want to get that on the soak straight away.
Can't understand this at all.
Ham awakens to find himself in bed with one of Sion's harem, only to be joined by 2 more. And then, pretty quickly away from the sexy sexness, Ham and Sebastian uncover an underground crypt used for a ceremony. Asmodeus was trapped by his enemies centuries ago, and it appears Sir Geoffrey had broken the seal, freeing Asmodeus, who killed Sir Geoffrey and took his form. There's some plot element where Sir Geoffrey hosts several influential leaders at his parties with the idea that Asmodeus is trying to control, well, whatever there is. It turns out that it's actually Mitri who died and was replaced by Asmodeus, and the film climaxes with a ritual sacrifice of Anitra, which of course ends with Sebastian intervening and dealing with Asmodeus using a homemade golden bullet, which traps the demon but doesn't destroy it. I dig. At home, I put up a no junk mail site, which protects my mailbox against all demonic threats, circulars and catalogues, but unfortunately does not guard against brochures from real estate agents. The epilogue has the pair back at Sebastian's house, with Anitra turning up to reward Sebastian with a painting and to reward Ham with, well, it's a Gene Roddenberry story, so I think we can all work out what that means. And no, it's not Subutio. Of course, as a supernatural thriller, you need the twist at the end. But did they talk about all the amazing adventures that they would have in the future?
Asmodeus, Prince of Lechery, Lord of Corruption.
Things to clarify. A succubus is a demon that uses sexuality to ensnare its target, and not, repeat, not, a nickname for a bus service operated by Stagecoach. John Hurt is an actor's name, not an excuse for John to stay home from work, and Britain is often presented in American-produced media as being cold and wet. Though that last one's not really a clarification or a denial. Spectre is best described as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, but they're American. But they're investigating supernatural phenomenon, but they're in the 70s. They visit a house that is at first the Playboy Mansion, but morphs into the sex party house in Eyes Wide Shut, and then ends up as a Hammer horror film. Spectre started off as an idea that Roddenberry had been developing in 1972, where something dealing with the occult had been suggested by his wife, Majel Barrett, who'd had a keen interest in such things. Roddenberry would bring in writer Samuel A. Peoples, who had written Star Trek's second pilot. As Star Trek had been having its rebirth in syndication, Roddenberry was once again a hot property in Hollywood, and that's metaphorical. He wasn't a piece of land in the desert. At this time, Roddenberry had an animated Star Trek series on the go and had deals to develop several pilots, some of which we've covered in another video. None of those other pilots went to a series, but all were based around science fiction concepts. Spectre, instead, zeroed in on 70s fascination with the unexplained. Like, why isn't Bigfoot being charged double at the podiatrist?
I do not believe in this nonsense.
Early versions of the Spectre concept had a third main character, echoing the trio of leads in Star Trek. In the produced script, that would become Sir Geoffrey Sion. When networks passed on the idea, existing deals would lapse and Spectre would be one of the many pilot scripts prepped but never shot. Then, supernatural horror-laced thrillers began doing good business in theatres with movies like The Exorcist and The Omen, and suddenly Spectre was saleable. 20th Century Fox financed a pilot, but only if it could be made quickly. Spectre was put into production in early 1977, with the hope it would quickly sell as a series for the 1977-78 season. Like Baffled, it was shot in the UK, though this time at EMI Elstree Studios. It was led by director Clive Donner, and much of the crew would be British, though again any resulting series would likely have been shot in the US. Robert Culp was the star of the 60s spy series I Spy and took to inhabiting his roles as a method actor. He'd had clashes on other sets, and again on Spectre he'd have a frosty relationship with both Roddenberry and Donner. Co-star Gig Young was a respected character actor, though had a turbulent off-screen life, where his battles with alcoholism affected his career to the point where he was replaced by Gene Wilder on the movie Blazing Saddles. His story has a tragic end, where a year after Spectre, he murdered his new wife and turned the gun on himself. John Hurt was making waves in the British industry just before his Hollywood breakthrough in films like Alien and The Elephant Man. Gordon Jackson was at the time appearing in British action series The Professionals, though here the subversion of his police inspector character is kind of fun. Vicky Michelle would later star in Allo Allo. Multiple versions of Spectre were made. One version was designed for television without the nudity and some of the more overt sexual themes, and there was a version set for theatrical release in Europe. NBC screened its version of Spectre as a movie in 1977, but it was not picked up as a series. By this time, though, Gene Roddenberry was focused on bringing Star Trek back to first the small screen and eventually the big screen. Spectre has a very 70s soundtrack that is just a little too much of its time, and this is one project where Gene Roddenberry's sexual obsessions seem to make it to the screen unscathed.
Am I interrupting?
No, they're just leaving.
Towards the end, when many of the revelers are showing their demonic selves, the makeup effects are a little hit and miss. The lizard-like manifestation of Asmodeus was considered a little too silly to show for any longer than was absolutely necessary, but then they used it on the cover of the novelisation. Spectre can be a bit muddled in places, but it is by far the most entertaining of the three movies that we've looked at in this video, and it's the one that I most would have liked to see as a continuing series. The timing was terrible, hitting just as networks had decided they really wanted more science fiction for their genre programming. So we have three pilots that were middling to solid movies that offered varying amounts of entertainment value, just as offering vodka to a horse, a German shepherd and a sulphur-breasted cockatoo will result in varying amounts of entertainment value.
But it has a nice sound to it.
Search for the Gods flirts with the idea of aliens having influenced Earth, but really is just a treasure hunt masquerading as a scientific expedition with a little hint of Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Man, you have really gone off the deep end.
Baffled is a standard ITC adventure series, just with Leonard Nimoy having bursts of ESP.
Mr. Varelli, and he's covered with blood.
Spectre was Sherlock Holmes with demons.
It's impossible for something to feel evil to the touch.
Any major flaws can be overlooked by the solid casting, but unless you're a massive fan of the subject matter or the actors involved, or you like shows where people explore basements, tombs or caverns, then these three movies are optional viewing. And if you're just watching for Leonard Nimoy, maybe just skip these and watch old episodes of In Search Of.
There is no mystery.
If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below or check out some of our other videos.
You choose.
Are you a succubus?